Hey, welcome to Square Body Stuff. I'm Chad, and there's no trucks in the shop. That can mean one of many things. Either I'm not doing anything, or we're working on a stroker motor. If you've been following along, you know we're building a 339 stroker out of a 305 block with a 383 crank, which is a 375 stroke crank, 6-inch rods, forged pistons, bunch of goodies, and it's going to be hit with some nitrous. I've got a playlist going. Go check that out. I'll try to put a link to it up here in the corner to get you caught up on what I'm doing here. This video, I'm going to be doing the checking the main bearing clearance. I think one of my other videos, I done the check the crankshaft. I measured the crankshaft of the micrometer because I've got all that information wrote down on my chart or my sheet. But at the time I didn't have the machine or the block machined and the caps and all that stuff machined yet, so I couldn't get the main bearing measurements. So I'm all set up for that now. Block's machined, everything's ready to go. So I'm going to set these main bearings and the caps and everything in the block, get them all torqued down one at a time, and then I will use this dial bore gauge to check my clearances. Also in that playlist, I go over how to set up a dial bore gauge, your micrometers and all the measuring tools in another video, so I'm not going to go through all that again in this video, just to kind of save some time. Also, I'm going to be in the end of this video, towards the end of this video, once I get done checking everything with the dial bore gauge, I'm going to be using a plastic gauge, which I've never used a plastic gauge before. So it'll be, there's not much to it. A lot of people use these. It's a good economical way to check your clearances. There's nothing wrong with it. I've just always had, access to measuring tools to measure with micrometers and such. So, but I'll go ahead and show you how to check your main bearing clearance with the plastic gauge also, if you want to stick around for that. Alright, so what we got here is a 305 block. It is machined for splayed caps. It was originally 2-bolt main, which all 305s are 2-bolt main, but I had it, the caps machined, everything done, line bored, line honed. They done a really nice job on the line hone down at Hood's Performance in West Plains, Missouri. If you're in the area, go check them out. I've also got the main studs, which of course the outer bolts have to be bolts. You can't have studs because of the angle. The crankshaft I'm using is an old school Kohler brand. I think Kohler went out of business like in 2007, but I ran across this crank at an awesome deal. It's standard, nothing wrong with it. Everything's, of course, everything's balanced now, but there's the part number. COL is a Kohler 375 stroke, and I can't see those numbers, but anyways, it's a good forged crank. It's externally balanced. The bearings I am using are some King Racing XPs, these guys here. So let's get to checking these main bearing clearances. Well, I'm going to check the measurement, and then that will give him my clearance. Where we're at right now is my journals on the crankshaft all measured out to 2.448 across the board, so the crankshaft is good. All my rod bearings, I've already got those done. That's in another video if you're interested in checking that out. I can show you the rods I got real quick. The rods I'm using are some Speedmaster I-beam rods, 7/8 bolts. Supposed to be good for up to 1,000 horsepower. So we should be good there. Bushed ends for floating pins, and also King bearings for the rods. Alright, first thing I want to make note of is, even when you're just measuring stuff and doing the mock-up stuff, cleanliness is key. Make sure everything is as clean as it possibly can be. That way you don't have any issues with having a piece of dirt somewhere or scratching anything up. So make sure everything's clean. If you're not sure if it's clean enough, clean it again. So I've got everything laid out, everything's cleaned up. I'm gonna start with my number 5 main cap, get the bearing set in the block, and then I'll get the cap with the bearing set in it on there, and I'll get that torqued down. I'll take the measurement on it, and then I'll just kind of go down through the row and get all my measurements, and then I'll write it all down and I'll show you what I come up with. I think I'll go ahead and put all my bearing halves into the block. Everything is dry, there's no lube, there's no oil or nothing. Get everything set in. And once I got those in, I'm gonna go ahead and get everything another quick wipe down just to make sure there's nothing in there. Also, the studs I'm using are ARP studs, and they take a different torque than factory bolts do. I think they're 80 foot-pounds, so, and the inners and outers will be 80 foot-pounds. I don't remember off the top of my head what the stock is. I think it's 60, 65, something like that. But these are 80 foot-pounds according to ARP. And I like to go ahead and get them kind of seated in the register before I put any torque on them. That way it's you're not forcing anything. Another thing is, make sure you have some good lube on your threads. And I'm using ARP fastener lube. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and torque these down, and I like to go slow. Some people do it in 3 sequences. I do it in 4. I like to make sure it's good and seated before I start putting it a good amount of torque to it. So I'll start out with 20. Then go to 40, 60, and then 80. And on the rear main cap, you'll have your oil pump. I like to go ahead and mount the oil pump to it, torque it down. That way, if there's any variance, you're going to catch it. Now at the machine shop, whenever they line hone this, or line bored and line honed it for these caps, they had an oil pump on there, which I've got one I've cut up. Turn it the right direction. And of course, obviously, torque it down. Now I got my cap torqued, oil pump torqued on it. I can go ahead and set my dial bore gauge in there and get my reading. Move it until it and if you could tell, or if you're watching there, you could see I was on the flat. You don't want to be in that groove, the oil groove, obviously. Now on the number 5 bearing, it's a little easier to measure because you got 2 big surfaces. Now the rest of these, you have to be on either side of the oil groove just to make sure you're, you don't want to get down that oil groove or you'll have a bad measurement. So I'll go ahead and get the rest of these measured up, get them wrote down, and see where we're at. Alright, I got them all done with the micrometer. We'll see what we got here. We got 4 thousandths clearance on, well, wait a minute. I got these all backwards. This should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anyways, disregard that. That should be 5. Anyways, 5 has 4 thousandths, which I'm not too worried about that. That's a little bit on the loose side. I was looking for 2 to 3. I've got my main caps off. I left the bearing halves in the block. In order to do the plastic gauge, you'll have to have them in there. Make sure there's no oil on them. Make sure they're dry. Same thing goes for the crankshaft. Make sure it is dry, no oil on it. You want to make sure that your bearing halves and your caps are dry. For this step, to use plastic gauge, you'll need everything dry. Did I mention everything needs to be dry? Well, let's take a look at this plastic gauge stuff, see what it's about. This one, the red is from 2 to 6 thousandths, and that will be your clearance range. And it has on here, green is for 1 to 3, blue is for 4 to 9, yellow is for 9 to 20. So it depends on what your clearances are. It depends on which color you want to get. I got the red because I knew I was going to be, well, my preference was from 2 to 4 thousandths on my bearing clearances for this. So that's what I got. Like I said, I've never used this before. This will be the first time I've ever used it. So let's just see. I'm just kind of curious to see how close it is to, you know, using cheap Chinese dial board gauge and micrometers. Anyways, let's set this up and get this crankshaft set in the block. Once we get it set in the block, I will put the #1 main cap on and with the plastic gauge, and I'll show you how to use it. How about that? You want to set it on there. Hopefully it stays. Leave it on there as straight as possible. Get your cap on there. Get it seated real lightly. Now, these threads are already lubed up, so I don't need to put any extra lube on them. Alright, now that it's torqued down, make sure you do not move it. Don't move the crankshaft. Get it torqued and then simply untorque it. Pop your cap off. Then you take this and you measure, use the non-metric side. Alright, so yeah, we're right at real close to the 2 thousandths. Yeah, we're just a little bit off. It's really close. But what that shows you is how much clearance you really got. Hopefully you can see that. In the camera, you just take your deal. If it was there, then you'd be 3. It just depends on where you're at. And that's how you measure it with the plastic gauge. Now you've got to clean all this crap off. Either way, plastic gauge is it's a very economical way to check your clearances. There's nothing wrong with using the plastic gauge. I like to see the numbers. I don't know. I'm just kind of weird that way. But anyways, now I didn't want to make this like a plastic gauge versus micrometers video. I don't want to show different ways to do it. So, you can do what's best for you. If you don't want to, buy the gauges or the micrometers and stuff like that, plastic gauge will get you the information you need to make sure you're not too tight. It's plenty good. Nothing wrong with it. So use a plastic gauge if that's what you want to use. Nothing wrong with that. All right, last thing we need to do while we're checking our crankshaft clearances is to check the end play, and that is the fore and aft clearance. So what I've got is the crankshaft set in here. I got the rear main cap torqued down, but before I torqued it down, I got it just kind of snugged up, and I tapped the crankshaft forward to get the main cap or the main bearings seated going this way. And then I went ahead and torqued this cap down. I set up my dial indicator, which it's seen its better days, but it still measures out good. But then what you do is you'll take a screwdriver and in between your crankshaft and your cap, pry it forward, which that's where we're at right now. We're at 0. Then you pry it backwards. Pry it backwards, and you'll get your clearance. Now, move the other way. We're back at 0. Back the other way. We're at, what, 3 thousandths. So that is plenty. 2 to 6 is kind of where I like to stay. Which I don't have that on my... Yeah, I got it. I'll just write down thrust 0.003. So now I've got my thrust clearance set. I know it's good. And now we can move on to the next part. So hopefully somebody got some good out of this video. Hit me up in the comments. I want to know what you guys think that this little 339 stroker might make for horsepower. I really want to, and I'm planning on, hopefully, if everything works out right, gonna put this thing on a dyno. I can't promise anything, but that is my utmost, highest intentions, to put this thing on a dyno and actually get some numbers on it. So let me know in the comments below what you think this thing's gonna dyno at. I know I've got my hopes at a number, and it's fairly conservative, but anyways. And that'll be naturally aspirated. I'm not going to spray it on the dyno. Can't do anything like that. But anyways, I appreciate you guys watching. Hopefully you guys have a good new year. Yeah, and we'll be getting some more stuff done on this thing. Yeah, I'm excited about it. I know you guys are excited about it. I've got several comments of what's going on with it, and I'm working on it. I'm doing my best. So till next time, y'all keep your square bodies rolling, or whatever it is you're driving around or building, and we'll catch you later.